Hi, I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com, and today we're joined in studio by Anne Milford, one of the co-authors of How Not to Marry the Wrong Guy. The book gives advice on how to go with your gut instinct when you think a relationship might be wrong for you. Obviously, it's most of the advice is geared towards women on how not to marry the wrong guy, but there's some advice in there that'll apply to our audience as well. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, first off, what was your motivation behind the book? How did this come about?
Well, 18 years ago, I called off my wedding. And I was dating a guy. He was a nice guy, but he wasn't the right guy for me. And I really think I knew that from the beginning of the relationship, that we weren't right for one another, but I stayed in the relationship. Ultimately, 5 months before the big day, I called it off. And when I came back to my hometown, I was stunned by the number of women who pulled me aside and said, I wish I'd called off my wedding. I knew I was making a mistake when I walked down the aisle. And so that sort of planted the seed that someday, as a writer, I would like to write a book about that, to explore that topic.
So why would a guy pick up the book, How Not to Marry the Wrong Guy? What advice is there for guys?
Well, actually, all the advice in this hot pink book actually is relevant to men and women alike, because really at the core of this book, and the reason why people marry the wrong person, is because they ignore their gut feelings. Throughout the courtship and dating, I think so many of us want to be in a relationship for different reasons, but they ignore those gut feelings, squelch them, shove them to the side, when really they should explore them. And that's when, we talk about red flags, but red flags are different for everybody.
Yeah. So how do you, if you've been in a bad relationship, you obviously looking back can tell that there were red flags in it. How do you recognize it while it's going on?
Well, it's anything that just doesn't sit right with you. For example, we say, you're out to dinner and your date is extremely rude to the waiter, or is dominating the conversation, or really bossy. Any sort of behaviors that just make you uncomfortable, you need to kind of take a deep breath and observe, is this something that is happening consistently? Yeah. I did talk to a lot of men in the course of writing this book, and one gentleman said there was just always a lot of drama in all of her interactions with those people around her. And he knew that from the beginning, and he ignored it. And he lived to regret it. They got married anyway. And from the get-go, he said he was standing at the end of the aisle knowing he was making a mistake.
Now, in the hundreds of interviews you did for the book, you obviously came across many reasons why women were staying in mediocre or bad relationships. What were some of the most common reasons, and do you think guys are staying in bad relationships for similar reasons?
I think some of the reasons are similar, but what's interesting, and what I think your audience would find more interesting, is that a lot of the reasons that the women stayed in the mediocre relationships were, maybe they'd set an arbitrary deadline of, I want to be married by the time I'm 30, or I'm tired of being alone, or maybe even some issues of financial security. The men tended to stay in the relationships because they had been going on for so long, and they sort of had a sense of duty or obligation, or they didn't want to hurt her feelings. It was more, the men's reasons for staying in the relationship were more about the other person, not so much about themselves.
Now, was that surprising to you, or what were some of the more surprising findings you
came
across?
The most surprising finding was how many people admitted to me, I knew I was making a mistake on my wedding day, and they went through with it. In fact, we estimate if you take 10 divorced men or women, 3 of them will admit that. They'll say, I knew it was a mistake beforehand. So our mission with How Not to Marry the Wrong Guy is really to help anyone who is struggling with doubts in a relationship figure out whether they're marrying the right person for the right reasons, and sort of give them the courage, or help them tap into that courage to make the decision to get out before it's too late.
Now, do you think when these women told you that they're standing at the altar knowing they're making a bad decision, do you think they're at the point where they're just too far into the relationship to get out? Or, why do people go through with it?
Well, a lot of times, there's different reasons why they stay in the relationship, and then the reasons are similar yet shift why they agree to get engaged, why they say, yes, I will marry you. And then the reasons are different again, why they say, I do. As you get closer to the wedding, it's more about canceling the idea of they don't want to cancel the wedding. It's embarrassing. All the money that they've spent, the deposits, etc. They think it's too late. And we say, the organist can have her, fingers poised over the keyboard. It's never too late. But I don't know, the men and women reasons are similar, yet somewhat different.
Now, does the same advice and I guess theme throughout this book, I mean, does it apply to second marriages as well, or is this sort of?
Yes. And I think people who are, who have been through a divorce, they really should try to figure out what went wrong the first time. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting too, when people say, I knew I was making a mistake on my wedding day, a lot of people have questioned and said, well, don't people want to just make excuses? And they're looking back and making that statement. I don't believe that at all, because a lot of times the people who told us that, they were very honest about their own mistakes that got them there. I should have paid closer attention to those red flags. Mm-hmm. I should have found the courage to get out of that relationship. I wish I had made some different decisions. Yeah. So people who are approaching a second potential marriage really need to figure out what went wrong the first time, but also make sure that they're not squelching those gut feelings.
Yeah. Well, divorce rates, they go up with each marriage. They get higher. So perhaps that should be required reading for any subsequent ones. Where can people buy this book?
It's available at a bookstore near you, Barnes & Noble, Borders, Amazon.com, Powell's. You can order it at your independent bookstore. It's available nationwide and in Canada, and it's being actually translated into Chinese.
Hey, cool.
Yeah.
Global reach.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming in with us. I appreciate it. That's Anne Milford. She's one of the co-authors of How Not to Marry the Wrong Guy. That'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com.